Welcome to the Chaos Sector. Halloween was the original slasher franchise. Released in 1978, with its ghost-like character in Michael Myers, it became one of the more popular films in its era. In fact, Friday the 13th, with Jason Voorhees, adopted the very concept of Halloween before it. Audiences feared Myers as children, and even as adults. There are many to this day who will not watch a Halloween film. With that being said, we have to break down why Halloween became nothing more than a fractured franchise, with multiple timelines, several retcons, and currently slated to all come to an end, with Halloween Ends. For all fans of Jamie Lee Curtis, I apologize in advance. Executive producer, Moustapha Akkad, was presented with an idea for a horror film. The idea was basically about an unstoppable serial killer who targeted babysitters. He searched for directors and screenwriters to bring this idea to the big screen. Akkad found John Carpenter and Deborah Hill. John Carpenter gave this serial killer an identity, Michael Myers. This apparently was based on an individual Carpenter met while in college, who apparently was quite creepy. As a result, the character was born. A young woman named Jamie Lee Curtis was selected to play a babysitter who was targeted by Michael Myers. Her character in Laurie Strode was based on a real person, an ex-girlfriend of John Carpenter. Donald Pleasant was selected to play a doctor in Sam Loomis, who concerned himself with the threat that a young Myers would pose to society. And Halloween was born, released in 1978. Then, Akkad approved of the sequel to that film, releasing Halloween 2 in 1981. A year later, Halloween 3 was released, without Myers, which Akkad didn't approve of, but he was outnumbered, and the film went the anthological route. Then Akkad brings Myers back, in Halloween 4 and 5, which John Carpenter and Deborah Hill didn't really approve of. They were not involved, only credited for the theme music and such. Carpenter and Hill had signed all of their rights away to Akkad, who gained ownership. Briefly, Carpenter and Hill wanted the Halloween franchise to be anthological, but Akkad disagreed with that plan, and they basically parted ways. This will be important later. Then Halloween, Curse of Michael Myers was released in 1995. Now, let's break down the timeline. In a press conference regarding H2O, Jamie Lee Curtis claimed that she didn't want to return to Halloween after the first film. Let's view that press conference for a moment.
This question is from Ryan Sexton from Indianapolis. There he is. He's asked, do you ever regret killing off Laurie Strode?
All right, here's the deal. I did Halloween 1, did those other movies, and then I did Halloween 2. Sean didn't do Halloween 2. I did Halloween 2. You know, picked up the moment Halloween 1 left off. Felt like I should be the same girl. I was very proud to be in Halloween 2. I never intended to be in another Halloween movie. And then, 20 years later, 19 years later, I called John and Deborah and said, you know, the movie's going to be 20 years old next year, and we're all still in show business. And it seems kind of crazy. I don't think there's ever been a movie that was 20 years old where all of the people involved in the movie are in a way more famous now than they were then. It's usually the opposite. I said, so it seems like this is an opportunity to do something that's never been done. 20 years later? And so that's how H2O came about. Now, the idiot girl that I am is that I didn't go, you know what, this is all my idea, I'm gonna frickin' produce it. So, sadly, I did not take on that role, and I should have. So what happened is John ended up not doing it, although he started to do it. Then Deborah ended up not doing it. And it was Kevin Williamson kind of came on to do it.
So, Curtis claims after the original Halloween film, and the sequel which picks up where the previous left off, she did not intend on doing any more Halloween films. Now, this is very important, because she decided to do H2O, as it was 20 years later. Let's put a little context into her take on the film, because there is more drama behind H2O than some 20-year anniversary. First off, let's address Carpenter and Hill. Carpenter wanted to do the film, but requested approximately $10 million as a 3-part deal with Dimension Films. Since he hadn't been properly compensated for the original work, he felt that was rational. Understandable, but Akkad and Carpenter couldn't reach those terms, and Carpenter decided to walk away. And I guess Hill was convinced as well to not participate in the production. But ironically, they are credited in the film, so they did have some part in the development. The movie was originally supposed to be a sequel to Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. Kevin Williamson's original treatment for H2O included a scene in which Halloween 4 through 6 are all referenced and acknowledged as being in continuity and canon. The scene was filmed, and it involves Sarah, the student at the school where Laurie Strode teaches under the name Carrie Tate. Sarah gives a class report on the Hanfield murders, going into great detail about Jamie Lloyd, Laurie Strode's daughter in the Curse of Thorn timeline. Sarah mentions Jamie losing her parents in a car accident, as was the explanation in those sequels for Laurie Strode's absence. Her report chronicles Jamie being hunted and eventually killed by her uncle Michael Myers, and upon hearing this oral presentation in the classroom, a grief-stricken Laurie retreats to a restroom and vomits. Williamson's challenge was thus to create a logical explanation for Laurie's death in the previous movies and her subsequent resurrection, while keeping the 4th, 5th, and 6th films in the continuity. He came up with Laurie faking her death and getting into the witness protection program with her son, under the alias Carrie Tate. This scene was omitted from the final cut, and every reference to the Curse of Thorn timeline. It was decided that these sequels would be ignored, and the film would directly follow Halloween 2. Even though there was no longer a direct reason for Laurie to have gone into hiding under a fake name, this element of the original plot remained in the finished film. So the decision was made to keep the secret identity aspect, but not the idea of it being a continuation of the previous films? Why? Doesn't that make Laurie's backstory a bit more intriguing? She had a daughter, who was killed, faked her own death prior, and now returns, with a son, under a different name. Boy, she's been through a lot, right? Yet, if it's basically a sequel set 20 years later, what depth does Laurie's backstory truly have, without the element of a daughter being killed? Keep this in mind, because there is a specific reason why this idea was shot down. But let's continue with the press conference.
So now we're the kind of like thing is heating up, and I had said to them from the beginning. So the idea is 20 years later, her life is a mess because she's been on the run her whole life, hiding from this potential threat. She's an alcoholic, she's a dope fiend, her life is a wreck. And obviously he comes back, but we create a scenario whereby she turns the table and says, you know what, fuck it. If I'm gonna die clean, because the life I'm living now is no life. I am not alive in this life. When you're running and afraid your whole life, you have no life. And there was a real sort of deep message of facing fear and living in truth. And if you face the fear, you can live. If you don't face the fear, you're dead anyway. And she was sort of dead anyway. So that was the idea of the movie. And I have said from the beginning, so we're gonna frickin' kill this fucker. You know, it's like, so the end of the movie is that I end it. We're gonna end it here. And everybody was like, yeah, awesome. So the first script comes in, and the script is good, and it's dark, and blah, blah, blah. And then the last scene, you know, something happens, and, you know, a car goes off a cliff or something, and it's, you know, they've written it like, the flames reflect in her face, and she knows it's over. I was like, no. Remember the scene we talked about where he gets pressed in between the Beverly Hills high school pool? You remember in It's a Wonderful Life? You know, when they're dancing and they fall in the pool? That's a real Beverly Hills high school pool. The basketball court is on top of the pool. And it's still there, and it still moves. And I was like, no. This is a private school, she's the headmistress. They have that pool. And no, he's gonna fall into the crack. She's gonna shut the fucking pool on him and cut off his fucking head with an axe. And they're like, yeah, right. Script comes in, end of the thing, the car goes off the fucking cliff, and the light reflects in my face. And now we're like a month away from shooting, and I'm really getting panicked because I don't understand. We have these meetings, we have these talks, and then some ambiguous ending is written in. So I go to the office really pissed. I walk in, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening here? I don't understand this. And we had a stake through the heart, we had a head chopped off, we had it all. And they looked at me and said, Jamie, there's a clause in the contract with Mustafa Akkad that says you can't kill him. What? There is a clause that says we are not allowed to kill him. Now you fucking tell me?
Now everyone is laughing and joking, obviously fans of Jamie Lee Curtis, but this is exactly the problem with her. She is very arrogant. What makes Curtis think that she can single-handedly control the destiny of a Halloween franchise, by essentially creating the storyline where she kills Myers in H2O? Really? Are you serious? Mustafa Akkad invested entirely too much time, effort, and money into this franchise, to have some self-absorbed Hollywood actress demand that a horror icon be killed off. Just because you didn't want to be a part of the franchise anymore, and because you had this so-called idea for the film, does not mean you can control the destiny of its star player in that film. Curtis thought, in her arrogance, that her idea of a Halloween film 20 years later translates to literally determining how the film plays out. Well, if she would have produced her own version of Halloween.
Wait a minute, let me interject. I don't believe this is why H2O was produced. Because, for Jamie Lee Curtis to claim it was her idea, or better yet, apparently she was the only one who thought about the franchise after 20 years, is highly unlikely. If Curtis claims she never wanted to do another Halloween film, why would she be the first to acknowledge its 20-year anniversary? You have Carpenter, Hill, and other writers involved, and the executive producer. Surely they knew it was the 20-year anniversary as well, right? All Curtis did was act in the film, while the production team brought the film to life. So who's more likely to think about its anniversary first? The actress? Or the production team? I think you know which one. What we have here is a self-centered, arrogant, spoiled actress who wanted to take credit for the film. And she wanted to take credit for the film because it acts as a distraction for the real purpose. Remember, Kevin Williamson presented a storyline linking the previous films to H2O. The production team turned it down because it would cause many problems for Curtis. I will explain in a moment, but let's continue.
And so, Kevin Williamson says.
Now, did you hear how Curtis says Kevin's name? It obviously had a bit of spite in it, indicating she had an issue with him.
Kevin Williamson says.
It may be due to how this one person unknowingly wanted to thwart the plans of the rest of the production team, which included Carpenter and Hill initially. The plan was to eliminate all previous films, basically starting from the 1981 sequel. This eliminates the storyline of Jamie Lloyd, Rachel Carruthers, Kara and Danny Strode, Tommy Doyle, and Dr. Wynn. Once again, after Halloween 4, Carpenter and Hill sold their rights to a COD. They wanted nothing to do with the Jamie Lloyd timeline. Quite odd if you ask me, it provided a great storyline. Some thought otherwise.
What if, two words you never want to hear in a production office, what if you and the audience think that you've killed him? I said, okay, what? They said, we do it where you kill him. I said, okay, but how do I, no, you kill him. You will take it to the end and you will chop off his head. I said, and we know it's him. Yes, it's the guy in the mask. And I'm like, okay. So, and they said, will you accept that? Now you have to remember, it was a payday for me. No, I'm not joking. I mean, I got paid. So there was, when somebody contracts with you and you're like, maybe I'll get that new pair of shoes. You know what I mean? You kind of like spend the money a little in your head. It was going to give a little cushion in my family. So, there's a lot of stuff on the table here. It wasn't just like, So I said, okay, I think he's dead and everybody in the audience is going to think he's dead, correct? Correct. They said, will you accept that? And I said, yeah. As long as in the next movie, it opens with me in a mental institution because I have found out that the person that I killed was not him and was an innocent ambulance driver with kids, and that it has sent her gone. And then I then get to die. Because I'm not going to just live like this limbo life. That's not going to happen. And so that's why, sadly, I'm in Resurrection. Sadly. But that was how it had to work. I did that movie in order to satisfy so that when you finished H2O, you all believed and understood, or hopefully you believed and understood that it was him, even though it wasn't. So that was how that had to happen. So for me, it's all good. It's all good. So I had to end it for myself. And so the best way to do it would be to have him kill me. So I am D-E, A-F-ing D. There is N-O-C-H-A-N-C-E that I will ever be in another Halloween movie, unless Malik Akkad comes up with a frickin' big-ass payday for Jamie, where I might ultimately turn it over to a charity. But I'm talking about a big-ass payday, and then I'll let them figure out a way.
Alright, Curtis is way the fuck out there. She is out of her mind. Let's explain why Curtis ruined the Halloween franchise. I don't care about H2O, Resurrection, nor the current retcon trilogy. Curtis ruined not only the Halloween franchise, but she also ruined Danielle Harris's role in the franchise. Jamie Lloyd was killed off because of Jamie Lee Curtis. How the hell did I come to this conclusion? Come on, it's not hard to understand. Remember, Kevin Williamson wanted to add Jamie Lloyd into the storyline of H2O, and Curtis more than likely didn't want to include that. And the production team decided to omit that concept Williamson pitched. Who would have a problem with that storyline? Doesn't that make Laurie Strode more interesting? Losing a daughter, then trying to hide from her brother, who killed that daughter. Now she has a son in John Tate, explaining to him how his uncle killed his sister years ago? That is far more interesting than some boring storylines surrounding a depressed teacher who is still traumatized after 20 years. But the reason it wasn't added is because Jamie Lee Curtis was jealous of Danielle Harris. Jealous of a young actress? No different than an older sibling being jealous of their younger sibling. And that is based on attention. So if Jamie Lee Curtis actually returned in Halloween 4 alongside Danielle Harris, there is no question the storyline will center around the younger character. She saw Harris becoming the next Laurie Strode, who actually had more talent. Now remember, Curtis stated she didn't want to do any more Halloween films after the 1981 sequel. Well, it's quite ironic, because her character was killed off in a so-called car accident in the Halloween 4 plot. So you got what you wanted, regardless if it was your choice, or how the storyline was going to play out. Let me cut straight to the chase. Jamie Lee Curtis was pissed off that her character was killed off, which introduced her daughter in Jamie Lloyd. Don't fall for this high ground bullshit of Curtis claiming she didn't want to return to the franchise. If Halloween 4 didn't include a daughter in Jamie Lloyd or Danielle Harris, Curtis would have gladly returned. Because the storyline would obviously be about her and Myers. We see that now with the current retcons, despite other characters alongside her. This is her excuse, because the storyline killed her off, which she didn't like. For someone who didn't want to return to the Halloween franchise, Curtis has done just that. H2O, Resurrection, and a trilogy of Halloween films recently. That would be 5 films Curtis has starred in, yet didn't have an interest in returning after the original sequel? Yeah, okay, you can fool the dweebs in that audience, but not those who know better. Jamie Lee Curtis is full of shit. Curtis thought that her character would live forever, due to her arrogance, selfishness, outside of that fictional reality. She believes that she is bigger than the Halloween franchise, and can't fathom being killed off. We hear this, in how she thought she could just snap her fucking finger, and Myers will be killed in H2O.
What? There is a clause that says we are not allowed to kill him. Now you fucking tell me?
Do you realize that Jamie Lee Curtis and Danielle Harris had never met? How can 2 of the most important characters in the Halloween franchise never meet in real life? Jamie Lee Curtis has never mentioned Danielle Harris, and this is obviously an indication of conflict. She simply didn't like Harris, and as Harris gained a large fan base for her role as Jamie Lloyd, the questions arose about who is a better character in the series. Laurie Strode was a great character, Curtis did perform that role very well. But Danielle Harris had a greater performance, and she was younger. So the potential of the storyline revolving around her and her life was inevitably going to happen. And that's what Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, was supposed to be. I say, supposed to be, because that script was obviously altered to kill Jamie Lloyd off. And soon enough, after Jamie Lloyd was killed in the 1995 film, Laurie Strode returns in the 1998 film. This is not coincidental, this is intentional. Danielle Harris was solidifying herself as the main character of the franchise. Someone needed Jamie Lloyd to be eliminated, so the path can be cleared. Danielle Harris had an interesting take on how her character was done. We will let her explain how it all went down. This is the Chaos Sector, Film Reviews.